And then the second is actually the school nurse funding initiative. I didn't want to say it wrong.
It's okay.
All right. So at this time, if there are no questions or any discussion, I'm going to go ahead and take the vote. Any questions? Okay. So I will entertain a motion to approve both the chitter chatter and school nurse funding initiative items. Recommend approval.
So moved.
Oh, to go before the full board.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Mr. Jenkins and seconded by Mr. Sharp. So we'll go ahead and take a vote. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposition? Okay, so those are both passed to go before the full board today. Today? That's
Today.
fast. Yes. Any other questions or discussion? Okay, I will adjourn at this time.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Thomas Bullock. The final, not the final, the next committee that will convene is the Academic Services and Accountability Committee. Mr. Lamb?
This time I'd like to roll call Dr. Washington,
Here.
Mr. Vincent, Ronald Thomas Bullock, Gil Sharp.
Yeah.
I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Sharp, second by Mr. Thomas Bullock. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed likewise, motion carried. Mr. White, field trip.
So I'll bring one field trip that needs approval. The field trip is not until December, but we certainly need approval so they can plan for this trip. Northern Nash High School has the unique opportunity to fly out to Oregon for a boys basketball Capital City Classic. Nike is sponsoring this. They're paying for the flights, the hotel rooms. So we're very fortunate for our kids to be able to take part in this Capital City Classic. 10 of our players will be going with 3 coaches for this tournament. They will be returning on the 24th of December. Great opportunity for our kids.
I will entertain a motion to approve this field trip.
Second.
I make the motion.
Mr. Sharp made,
Oh, second.
Mr. Sharp made a motion, second by Dr. Washington. All in favor say
Can I do
aye.
a question?
Aye.
All opposed likewise, motion carried. Any other
Can I ask a question?
Any questions?
Yeah. That's a question. How do you manage that? I already know that, you know.
Just, we got some standout athletes and a lot of interest, and they got a unique opportunity.
That's awesome.
We going out with Mr. Thomas at the same time?
They need another chaperone.
CJ.
Here we go.
There's another chaperone.
Yeah, there's no chaperone. Any other reason?
Any other
We appreciate your support.
Any other business this time? I will adjourn and send it back to Dr. Washington.
Thank you. At this time, if there's no further committee, no, there's policy.
Policy.
All right, so at this time, we will, the policy committee will convene with Mrs. Bullock.
I would like to call the policy committee to order. I believe we do have a quorum. Mr. Gray, Dr. Washington, and Mr. Dutton, and me, and I'm missing somebody. There you are. All right, thank you. At this time, we've got several policies to discuss, and I'm just gonna turn it over to our attorney, Mr. Weber.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
So, there's not a large number of policies in terms of substantive changes today, but the ones that we do have are rather complicated, so I'm going to do my best to simplify things and give some background. So I think normally we would go one by one through each policy as it's listed on the agenda. I'm going to propose combining some of these. There are a number of these policies that have to do with changes in federal Title IX regulations, including the proposed repeal of your policy 1725, and you have 1726, and then the replacement of those repealed policies with 1720, a new version of 1725, and there's also a related policy 4023 about pregnant and parenting students. So it'd be my proposal just to talk about that block of 5 policies as a group, because there is some litigation pending, federal litigation not involving the Nash County Public Schools that kind of impacts how we consider each of those. If that's okay with So this is again, so I'm going to give a lot of background here about, again, it's policy 1725, 1726. Those are being proposed for repeal, and then the new policy 1720, 1725, and then 4023 is an existing policy, so they'll have some changes. Just for some quick background, the U.S. Department of Ed recently updated its Title IX regulations, and the new regulations went into effect on August 1st. This is a reminder, the U.S. Department of Ed's Office for Civil Rights is the federal agency that enforces Title IX, and Title IX generally protects people from discrimination based on sex and education programs or activities that receive federal funds. So I'll start with just a background on the regulations before diving into the policies. So the new federal regulations do a number of different things. First of all, they broaden the scope of what constitutes sex discrimination and sex-based harassment. So what that does on a practical level is it increases the types of incidents that could be and would be covered under your Title IX complaint process. Basically broadens the field for those claims. It also eliminates, there was this old requirement for sexual harassment complaints to be handled under a separate grievance process. So that's not the case anymore. Both your sex discrimination and your harassment complaints can both be handled under the same particular complaint process. The new regs also authorize the use of a single investigator who can make decisions and rulings on an investigation. Under the old regulations, those had to be 2 separate people. So you had an investigator, then a decision maker, and then appeals from there. This kind of streamlines that process. There are a number of other changes that also kind of simplify and streamline the investigation and the adjudication phases of the grievance procedures. The previous Title IX regs included a lot of due process for both parties, where there were opportunities to review evidence, submit written responses, revisions to reports. It was a pretty lengthy process. It was pretty involved. So this tries to streamline things and make it, in a way, like more similar to your other typical internal grievance and complaint processes. Some of the key things that are the same is that under the new regs, there's still a requirement for supportive measures to be provided to both complainants and respondents under Title IX, and there's also the same opportunity for informal resolution if the parties want to do that. There's also, of course, mandatory reporting by employees, as well as mandatory training. As to your policy 4023, the big impact on for the new Title IX regulations, and that policy deals with pregnant and parenting students. The new regulations require schools to provide accommodations for pregnant students as well as lactation rooms for nursing students, and allow leave of absence for pregnant students when it's medically necessary. So those are some of the big changes to that corresponding policy that we wouldn't normally think of as a Title IX policy, but it is. Getting to the policies now, so the NCSBA recently released model policy updates that address the new regulations. There are proposed repeals of policy 1725 and 1726. Those are your existing kind of core Title IX sexual harassment policies, and 1726 is the specific grievance policy. So those policies have been replaced with a new Title IX discrimination and harassment policy 1725. Confusingly has the same number to it, but it has a different title now. So instead of, again, having 2 separate complaint processes, it brings them all under one. So that's for both your discrimination complaints and your harassment complaints. And then there were some corresponding changes to your policy 1720, which is your Title IX non-discrimination on the basis of sex. And like I mentioned, policy 4023, 7233. So the new Title IX regs went into effect on August 1. The reason I'm giving all this lead up is because their enforceability nationwide right now is up in the air. It's the kind of thing that it's literally changing week by week. There have been lawsuits filed around the country in different district courts where the petitioners in those suits have been able to get injunctions prohibiting the enforcement and implementation of the policy statewide. North Carolina is not one of those states, so there is no statewide injunction that prevents the new regulations from going into effect. But there is litigation out of Kansas. There's a Kansas district court who a judge issued a ruling that enjoined the enforcement by the Department of Ed against 4 states, again, not North Carolina, so no statewide injunction here, as well as a specific school in Oklahoma. And then this is where it gets complicated for you and others in North Carolina. But the judge also enjoined enforcement of the new regulations in schools attended by members of 3 different groups. One is the Young America's Foundation, Female Athletes United, as well as schools attended by the children of members of the group Moms for Liberty. So importantly, the injunction did not prevent voluntary adoption of new procedures and policies to comply with the new Title IX regs. What it primarily did was it prevents the Department of Ed from enforcing the new regs or bringing an enforcement action against, in North Carolina at least, against a school who is on those lists. So after the injunction was filed, Moms for Liberty was required to file a list of schools, including just nationwide, including North Carolina, where they have members. There were initially none listed for NASH. Both parties, of course, appealed. Moms for Liberty tried to get a statewide injunction, or at least a countywide injunction. If they had members in schools, then the whole district would be enjoined. The judge denied those motions, but the judge did say that the injunction was forward-looking, in the sense that as Moms for Liberty adds members at schools, those schools could then be added to the list and submitted in supplemental filings to the court. So what this basically means is the list of schools where the regs are enjoined from enforcement, it grows week by week. There was initially none in NASH, actually surprisingly few in North Carolina statewide. They've been issuing somewhat regular filings to the court where they update their membership lists, and it's of course been growing. And as of today, and this would have been as of August 1st actually was the last time, a new list came out. The list now includes Spring Hope Elementary School. So I'll spring back to that in a second here. The other kind of key thing that's been happening is we kind of been waiting to see what OCR is going to do about all this. Like, what are they going to say in terms of whether they're going to enforce and how they're going to enforce. So they also just at the end of last week issued a statement where they've taken the position that while they cannot enforce the new Title IX regs in schools that are on the Moms for Liberty list, they can enforce the 2020 regs. So they've said that they expect those schools to continue to comply with the 2020 regs while this litigation is pending. And then again, Moms for Liberty has been updating their list. It seems to be weekly. Department of Ed has been posting updates, and we have folks who are tracking that as well. But as of today, it includes only one school in NASH, and that is Spring Hope Elementary School. So, so really, like, what this means is, as of now, the new Title IX regs cannot be enforced by OCR against complaints or regarding complaints coming out of Spring Hope Elementary School. But OCR can, if they said they will, enforce the new Title IX regs as it applies to any other school in NASH, so long as they're on the list. In addition, there are of course appeals pending, so the Department of Ed has filed an appeal, at least seeking to limit the scope. There's an open question as to whether a federal district court judge in Kansas has the authority to issue a nationwide injunction. There are a number of kind of complicated issues that are circulating, and those will be decided at any point, but in reality, probably not anytime soon. So all this to say, this entire situation is very fluid. There's a lot of confusion out there about what to do, and we are certainly working with school districts, and I've been in contact with Dr. Ellis and Dr. Farrow and Ms. Wallace just with the updates that we have. You know, our firm has been helping with training around all of this, and we're certainly available to do that here. But boards, you know, we've decided boards really have several options. Option one would be to just adopt the new NCSBA model policy updates as is. There is in your board policy, there's language in there, it's just standard language that basically authorizes a superintendent to essentially make revisions as needed to address changes in state or federal law. The thing with that is it requires those to come back at the very next board meeting for ratification. And that doesn't really work here when it could be months, right, before we have any kind of real sense of how far, you know, these regs go and whether they're enforceable, and, you know, the schools are going to change week by week. That option also probably makes the most sense only in districts where they don't have any schools in place. So that's certainly an option that you have, not necessarily one that I would recommend. The second option is to adopt the new NCSBA model Title IX policies largely as is, but to add what we're calling a savings clause. And that savings clause gives the superintendent and your Title IX coordinators the flexibility to follow the applicable regulations and process that's in effect at the time of a complaint, and to also consult with legal counsel, you know, as needed, just to make sure that whatever school complaint is out of that school and that the district is following the correct process. You know, that option allows the board to demonstrate clear compliance with the new regulations, right? There's formal board action that adopts all the new policies, but it also leaves flexibility because there's, you know, at least one school now, and there could certainly be more in the future that have to follow the old regs. So it balances those two things, and we think it really puts everyone on notice in terms of, you know, that flexibility. So complainants or respondents, they have a good sense that, you know, their process might not be the one that's listed for.
Jason,
Yeah.
can you move your mic up some, because between the air.
Oh, yeah, sure. I don't even know if it's on. Okay, there we go. Yeah, absolutely. So, so option two, again, that one, we think strikes a good balance, especially in districts where, you know, as of right now, at least, there's only a small number of schools that are on the list. Because really the majority of your schools, the OCR does have the authority to enforce the new regs in those schools. So option three is to not adopt the new NCSBA model policies and to instead adopt what we're calling an interim compliance statement that essentially directs your superintendent and the district to follow whatever the then applicable federal laws are while the board continues to study the policy changes and wait for further clarification as the litigation winds its way through the process. You know, in districts taking that option, the superintendent has been adopting interim procedures. So they're not board policies, but they're procedures that at least match, you know, the procedures under the new Title IX regs. And that option is really, it's been mostly appealing to clients where, you know, no matter the NCSBA model policy, they spend, you know, like multiple months reviewing it, you know, typically have their own custom changes that happen at the local level, as well as districts that, you know, have a majority, you know, of their schools that might be on the list. The last thing I'll just say is that there's some language, at least in the NCSBA, whatever you call it, the cover sheet that comes with their policy updates that seems to indicate that doing nothing is an option. You know, our firm, we certainly do not recommend doing nothing. You know, as of today, the new Title IX regs, they're in effect. I mean, they're the governing law for all schools as of today in Nash County Public Schools, with the exception of Spring Hope Elementary School. You know, if a board decided not to take any action at all, you know, there could be OCR enforcement action, which, you know, could impact federal funding. And of course, you could have claims from complainants that the district is being deliberately indifferent. The other key things to think about is even though there's pending litigation that challenges OCR's authority to enforce, again, that order did not prevent school districts from adopting the policies. It's really if OCR gets a complaint or OCR wants to enforce against a school on the list, OCR can't do that. So it's really, impacting what they can or can't do. All of that to say, I am happy to take questions about all of this. I think really the key things to keep in mind here are, again, that the injunction, while it is something that's growing week by week, it's something that impacts OCR's enforcement authority. It doesn't prevent you from adopting these changes. And if you want my recommendation, my recommendation is option number 2. That seems to be the one that strikes what I think is a good balance between demonstrating compliance and providing flexibility, especially as the number of schools changes. And I'm happy to read the savings clause that we've been drafting for districts if it's something you want to hear while you mull it over.
Are there questions? Mr. Sharp?
My question, Jason, is with all that communication that you just did, how much we comprehended behind that? My question is, what are other school districts, what plan are they adopting? From the largest to the smallest, is it consistent across the state?
I can't say it's consistent. I can say, we've certainly been just giving options. We can't tell you what to do.
What are other school districts across the state? Which method are they tracking?
I know of at least 2 that have adopted option 2 with the savings clause. There's 1 or 2 that have decided to adopt an implementation statement, but to otherwise defer to their superintendent to adopt regulations or procedures instead of policies. I don't know of any that are just adopting them without any changes, and I don't know of any that are doing little.
Also, Mr. Sharp, to piggyback on what Mr. Weber just said, I would also think that the options or the action that different boards take would actually depend on how their attorney sees these policies and how the individual attorney recommends what action that they do take.
So Madam Chair, may I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
And I know you've been serving in this capacity for quite some time. You have network connection with people throughout the state.
Yes, sir.
Have you had conversation with any of your colleagues regarding this?
No,
Okay, thank you.
I have not.
Okay, thanks.
And I would say part of that is because every single school board is doing what you're doing now. The NCSBA model policy updates came out maybe 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so I was just saying that might be because every single school board is in the same position you are. The NCSBA model policy updates came out roughly 2 weeks ago, a little over 2 weeks ago. So districts are either having special called meetings, they're considering this at their first August meeting. We'll know more probably in a week or 2 about what everyone's doing.
All right, Mr. Sharp, in response also to your question, let me read a disclaimer on what I call my cheat sheet.
Yes, ma'am.
And this is from the school board, North Carolina School Boards Association. Warning. New Title IX regulations are scheduled to go into effect August 1, 2024. Please consult with your board attorney before adopting the Title IX related policies. Some boards may be advised by their board attorneys not to adopt the new Title IX policies at this time due to an injunction that may affect schools in North Carolina, which is exactly what Mr. Weber was just talking about. Are there other questions? If there are no other questions, this is how I would like us to address the policies this evening, which is totally different from what we normally do. I would like us to handle the Title IX policies, the repeal policies, and also the recommended policies. Then there's one other policy that I would like us to handle separately. The other policies on the list, there would be, I think, one more, and then the policies with minor changes. We can handle that one policy and the minor changes policies as we normally do, if that's okay with our attorney. You think that's a working?
I think it is, really, the Title IX policies are really your 1720, 1725, 4023. 1710 has some changes that I can go through now that make sense. In terms of Title IX, it's mostly changes to the cross-references. Nothing, really substantive on the Title IX front. It just would now point to your new Title IX policies instead of your old ones, where it refers to how to handle those types of complaints. And Ms. Bullock, I think for the separate policy, you're referring to 1510, 4200, school safety, is that correct? Then there would be one
The
more.
separate one that I was talking about, in fact, there would be two, would be 4329, bullying and harassment behavior. And let's see, the ones with minor changes, those. And there's one other one I'll tell you, it's 1710, discrimination and harassment prohibited by federal law.
And I think that makes sense. Like, again, the school safety policy doesn't have anything to do with Title IX. 1710, 4020 mostly doesn't, it just changes cross-references. And then 4329, 7311, your bullying and harassment policy, that again, the only Title IX impact is a change in the cross-references. So it certainly makes sense to do those separately.
Okay.
Would it help for me to also read the proposed savings clause that I'm proposing adding to your Title IX policies?
Yeah, why don't you?
Okay. So our proposal, my proposal, with other school districts, for our clients who have selected option number 2 is, again, just to adopt the NCSBA model Title IX policy changes, mostly as is, but to add what we're calling a savings clause at the bottom. And that would read as follows. Given the ongoing litigation regarding the scope and effect of the federal regulations regarding Title IX, the process of investigating and adjudicating any complaints of sexual harassment or sex-based discrimination shall follow the applicable requirements of federal law then in effect, notwithstanding anything to the contrary in this policy. All reports of alleged sexual harassment or sex-based discrimination shall be routed to the Title IX coordinator as soon as practicable, who will contact the relevant parties and shall be responsible for assuring compliance with the applicable regulations in consultation with legal counsel as necessary.
Okay.
And I would recommend adding that to 1710, 1720, 1725, and 4023.
Okay, this is the motion that I think we need. We need a motion to repeal policies 1725 and policy 1726 to recommend approval to the full board for policy 1720, policy 1725, and policy 4023 with the aforementioned savings clause. Did I cover that right?
And the recommendation would be approval on first read.
Yeah, and approval on first read. If I could get a motion.
Motion.
Second.
Are there any questions?
Am I allowed to ask a question?
You are certainly allowed, you just can't vote, sir.
That's okay, I'll vote that later on in the day, I'll vote later on. So, Dr. L, this might be to you, because you was reading a lot about the Title IX coordinator, right? Who's our Title IX coordinator?
So we have three, Ms. Wallace, Dr. Farrer, and Ms. Miller.
I will just clarify, as it pertains to athletics, these new Title IX regs have nothing to do
Right,
with
they
sports
haven't come out yet.
participation.
Yeah,
The Department of Ed is going to deal with that in separate regulations. So this doesn't have anything to do with.
Okay, are there any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor of recommending to the full board approval of the policies aforementioned and for immediate approval, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Mr. Gray,
I'm sorry, I wasn't loud when I was speaking. Yeah.
and I saw Mr. Edwards' mouth moving, but like he couldn't get it out, and I'm
He got stuck in there.
so, and you are, and Mr. Dunn. So for recommendation to the full board, we have unanimous approval for those policies. Now, the next policy that we'll take separately is policy 1510 slash 4200 slash 7270, school safety. Mr. Weber?
Okay, this is also a time-sensitive policy update from NCSBA. So there was legislation last year that required school systems to create threat assessment teams and included a number of different requirements around the formation of those teams, what the membership is, what they do, and how threats are routed to the teams. The legislation required NCDPI through the Center for Safer Schools to provide guidance to districts so districts could adopt policies. And the deadline for DPI was end of December 2023. NCDPI did not provide guidance by that date, so we've kind of just been in a holding pattern waiting for it. They have recently provided that guidance around each of these different items, including again the membership on threat assessment teams, their roles, responsibilities, and everything else that you see in this policy. So each of these changes is in response to that NCDPI guidance document. Some of the examples in here, there's a new provision about training in terms of training for recognizing and reporting threats. There's also what you see, most of the changes are in section E that address the new requirements for your threat assessment teams. And there's also some updates to the cross-references and other legal references. This is another one that I would certainly consider approving on first read. The requirements were supposed to go into effect for districts beginning with this particular school year, but again, part of the delay has to do with waiting on guidance from the state.
Are there questions? All right, then, can I get a motion that we recommend approval on first read and waive the 30-day wait for policy 1510 slash 4200 slash 7270 school safety?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we recommend to the full board approval on first read and waive the 30-day wait on policy 1510 slash 4200 slash 7270. Are there any questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Well, thank you. I heard y'all that time. Motion carried. Thank you. Now, let's see, where are we? Policy 7232, discrimination and harassment in the workplace. For repeal 1710 slash 4020 slash 7230 for approval. And 4329 /7310, bullying and harassing behavior prohibited. And then the policies for minor changes, we can do all those together, and I'll read those names so we won't have to read them again. Policy 1300, governing principle, parental involvement. Policy 1500, governing principle, safe, orderly, and inviting environment. Policy 1600, governing principle, professional development. Policy 1700, governing principle, removal of barriers. Policy 1742/5060, responding to complaints. Policy 1760/7280, prohibition against retaliation. Policy 2500, option A would be hearing before the board. Option B would be another option for that same policy. And you'll talk to us about that. Policy 4040/7310, staff-student relations. Policy 7335, employees' use of social media. And policy 7820, personnel files. So, Jason, if you talk to us about those policies.
Absolutely. So I'll start with the proposed repeal of 7232 and the adoption of changes to 1710. So it used to have two separate complaint processes for discrimination and harassment claims that do not fall under Title IX but have to do with discrimination and harassment in the workplace. 1710 used to, and as of right now, it addresses complaints, for example, students by staff or students against students. And then there was a separate policy, 7232, that addressed the process for complaints submitted by employees against other employees. There has been a recent EEOC enforcement guidance document, which is basically like how they interpret the regs and what they do to enforce the regs if they get a complaint. That document indicated that they will now expect more robust reporting and complaint processes for complaints that occur in the workplace, so employee versus employee complaints. So the NCSBA, what they are proposing is a repeal of policy 7232, which right now is a little more higher level in terms of what the process is, and to instead address employee on employee complaints through policy 1710, which again primarily just provides a more robust and clearly defined process in terms of reporting, responding, investigating, and appeals as well. So those are the primary changes in 1710. There is also the encouragement of reporting. You'll see some of those changes throughout by victims and others. There, of course, is still mandatory reporting by employees, and there are some updates to the definitions of discrimination, harassment, as well as the application of the policy, and again, just updates to basically incorporate the process for complaints that occur in the workplace. Some of the key things here from a Title IX perspective is this policy also again includes updates to the cross-references. So it cross-references the new Title IX policies, and it deletes references to the old ones. So the board is going to consider approving those Title IX policies as a block, even though this isn't really a Title IX policy. It's substantively not necessarily designed to address that. It does have cross-references where if the board leaves one to sit out for 30 days, there would be incorrect references within this policy 1710. So this is one that you could also consider moving along on first read. I can pause here before going to the bullying and harassment policy, where I can keep churning through. Okay. All right, so 4329, 7311, that's your bullying and harassment policy. There are some updates in here that basically change the scope to make sure that it's clear that it applies to complaints, bullying and harassment complaints that have to do with federally protected characteristics. So instead of like listing them all out, it just has that catch-all phrase. So whatever's protected by the federal government, that's the kind of thing that's subject to this particular policy. And then there's also clarification in there that it also applies to bullying and harassment based on age, military affiliation, and genetic information. And then the others are all, I believe, just updates to the cross-references at the bottom of the policy. No substantive changes.
Are there questions? Because there really isn't any pushing reason for us to wait the 30 days on any of these except perhaps 1710, is that what you said?
1710, 4329, just down in the bottom in the cross-references includes an update to the Title IX policies, but not within the substance of the policy itself. So that would be incorrect and would need to be updated, but otherwise, really, substantive impact if it stayed out for 30 days.
So they can wait for 30 days?
It could.
Okay. Well then, is there a motion that we approve the policies? And let me read the numbers again. I won't read the title, but I'll read the numbers. Policy 7232 to be rescinded. Policy 1710/4020/7230. Let's see. Policy 4329/7311. Policy 1300, 1500, 1600, 1700, 1742/5060, 1760/7280. And I'm a little bit confused on option A and B.
Or which ones?
2500. They just updated.
So that is your board hearings policy. There's two different options. One is a very short policy, one is longer. The NASH policy is the shorter version. I think it's option B in the
Option B.
NCSBA policy manual. But this would essentially just change the cross-references in whatever version you have.
Okay, so policy 2500, option B. Policy 4040/7310, policy 7335, and policy 7820. I need a motion that we approve those policies and let them lay on the table, recommend to the board, rather, that we approve these policies and let them lay on the table for 30 days. Is there a motion and a second?
I make the motion.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the policies that were just read. Are there any questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. Motion carried. Is there anything else to claim our attention for tonight for the policy committee? If not, I declare our committee adjourned. Yes, sir.
Just a clarification, were there policies that were supposed to be approved in 30 days?
The last group, yes.
Thank you, Ms. Bullock, and the policy committee. If there's no further committee business to come before this board, I now will entertain a motion to adjourn committee meetings.
So moved.
Moved by Board Member E. Bullock, seconded by Board Member Thomas Bullock. If there any discussion, hearing none, all in favor, please let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. Committee meetings adjourned. Good evening. I'd like to call the Nash County Board of Education's work session to order. At this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. All right, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please let it be known by the sign of aye.
Aye.
Thanks, motion carried. At this time, I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, so now-
You do? No worries. No worries. Thank you.
I make the motion that we go into closed session pursuant to General Statute 143-318.11, A1, A3, and A6 to prevent the disclosure of confidential personnel files under General Statute 115C-321 to consider matters related to initial employment of an individual employee, to prevent the disclosure of confidential student records under General Statute 115C-402, and to consult with the board's attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made by Board Member Thomas Bullock, seconded by Dr. Chavis. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please let it be known by the sign of aye. Aye. We will now enter closed session. Thank you.